Welcome to Shielded Voices, the podcast where we break the stigma, build resilience, and support the men and women who serve our communities. I'm Mitch, a dedicated law enforcement professional with over 8 years of full-time experience and a combined 15 years of experience in law enforcement. My journey began as a police cadet, a reserve police officer, and now I am a full-time deputy. I am a defensive tactics instructor, an emergency vehicle operations instructor, and a former drug recognition expert. Now, I'm here to share the conversations that matter the most.
And I'm Brian, a deputy with over 15 years of service. I bring my experience as a defensive tactics instructor, emergency vehicle operations instructor, field training officer, a member of the riot team, as well as the narcotics team as a liaison. I'm also a veteran of the United States Army, and I am passionate about faith, family, and supporting our brothers and sisters in law enforcement.
Together, we're here to share stories, insights, and real talk about the challenges and triumphs of life in law enforcement. Whether it's breaking down the barriers around mental health, reflecting on our own shared experiences, or providing tools for growth and recovery, we're here to have the conversations that matter.
Our goal is simple: to support first responders, foster open communication, and remind everyone in this community that they are never alone. This is a space for growth, connection, and building stronger voices together.
Thank you for joining us. Let's dive into today's episode where we continue to break the silence. Okay, so we left off talking about the agency. We're back from break, by the way. Scott, so Brian is more through conversation, coming up with topics. I like to ask more direct questions, just stuff that can lead into conversation. And a lot of it's going to have to do with your retirement, your mental health after retirement, and kind of if you still experience that state of hypervigilance. But one thing I want to know is, you have 23 years of service. I know you spent time as a reserve. What caused you to retire at the time you did?
A lot. That's a good question. A lot of things. One was I was already 55, so for the state system, I was eligible to retire. I thought to myself, well, there's a lot of things that. The one, I wanted to retire in this job. I didn't want anything to ruin that or, whatever. But I think it was the numbers for retirement and pension and those types of things were obviously important. Is there a point where I've done this long enough? For some people, it's 30 years. For some people, it's 10. For some people, it's 20. It just depends on the person. I think I was at that point where I still liked being in police work, but it was getting to the point where I think I'm ready to go do something else or not do anything at all. In this case, I haven't been doing anything since I've left, which has been fantastic. So I think
I look at it as kind of like passing the torch to the next generation.
Yep.
Right. There's only so much trauma and so much that we can deal with that it may become a burden, but it's time to pass that torch on to someone else, someone fresh, someone new that can take that on.
Agreed. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it was that skill versus will thing that I mentioned earlier. We joke about that, but at the same time, it wasn't that I didn't care, I didn't want to do this job. It's like my will to do it was diminished compared to day one from when I first started. And I think that happens to everybody. And I know that our job is different, and there's a lot of stressors and other things that go along with it, which we've covered and you guys have covered. But a lot of jobs, if you've been in a job 20 years or more, whether it's a banker or a nurse, a teacher, some of that stuff is going to get mundane. Now, top work can't be mundane. Well, you haven't worked day shift, okay? Brian, I'm sure, is laughing at this right now. But the bottom line is, every time I got in the car, something different would happen every day. Probably just going to a different coffee shop was the spice that we put into it. But usually you would have something different. But when you get to the point where it's not different and it's very mundane, you got to decide, like you said, it's time to give new people the chance to do stuff that you're doing, and be the senior person. It's time to move on. How much more can you do? How much more can you take? How much more of this job can be taken? How much can this job take from you? And I don't mean that is it always taking. I mean, it does give you some stuff, It always gave me a lot of reward knowing that I did help some people along the way. But like you said, Mitch, I think it's a point where you just kind of go, it's time for me to do something else and let these newer, more energetic folks take on these issues.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when I first started at 21, I did a lot in the first 5 years of my career, to the point where, almost 9 years on, I feel like I need to pass that torch. However, each person's mental capacity is different. Some people experience more or less, but not to discredit them. That's their trauma. That's their experience. And it could be a 5-year cop. He decides, I'm not going to do this anymore. It could be 23 years on. It could be 30 plus years on. And that's the right time for them to pass the torch, or they're forced into retirement. How did it feel on your last day in uniform?
Man, well, I know that one of the things they try to do is, and this is something that people have been doing more in the last couple of years, I've noticed, that they try to pull you off the road for that last week that you're there, because you're turning gear. Why get involved in a critical incident? These type of things, right? But that very last day in uniform was probably one of the most stressful days of my life, because that whole last week, and maybe even a couple of weeks, I was hyper vigilant because I know I'm retiring. I've already sent my letter to the sheriff, letting them know that, hey, I'm leaving. All this stuff is in motion. They're making a shadow box. They're making a jail cave. Whatever it is they're doing, all this stuff is in order. They're getting all your paperwork ready. But that last week or so, we're always hyper vigilant in police work, but I was even more hyper vigilant because I didn't want something to go wrong. And especially that last day. And kind of a little bit of a story on my last day, and going back, talking about our wellness and these types of things. Our department instituted these better workout facilities, and then started allowing us to work out while at work. Now, I took advantage of that sometimes, but I was one of these old guys that would get up really early and work out and do it before work. Because there's a lot of things you had to do to work out at work, but they still let us do it. And there was, we joked about it a little bit, but there was a meditation room that they implemented at the precinct that I was working. And I rarely took my hour to hour and a half allotted workout personal time that I could do on duty. But I called the sergeant on my last day in the morning, and after we left briefing, I said, hey, look, if it works out, I would like to come back to the office. This is my last day in uniform. I want to come back and do my meditation for an hour and a half. And so my shift was over at 4 p.m. So around 2:00, I'm getting gas and I'm heading in, and nothing's happening. And the sergeant had approved this. So I go in, and I didn't realize how much pressure and stress that I'd been feeling that week until I got into the meditation room. It was not summertime anymore, but it wasn't cold yet. So I'm still wearing shorts to work and stuff like that, and t-shirts. So I go into this, I go change, put my gear away, knowing that I can get rid of it next week. And I go sit in this meditation room. I put in my earbuds and I start listening to music. And I tell you, I literally sat there and cried. I felt like I had just let everything go. And I sat there for a minute and cried in this room. It was dark in there, kind of. They had these weird, I don't know, clouds, these fiber optic clouds. I mean, you guys have seen them probably. And it kind of made you laugh a little bit, but then you sat in there and it's like the room served its purpose for me. My last hour and a half, I wasn't in my uniform anymore, but that last shift, because I'd been so hyped up and didn't even realize it. When I sat there, it just felt like everything just left. And I knew that was it. And it was probably one of the most interesting experiences of my career, because you just don't realize how much you're focused on all this other stuff that you don't take care of yourself. And I did most of the time, but that last day I was like, oh man, and it really hit you. And it only lasted for a few minutes, and then I felt better. And then it was, 3:30 and people are leaving, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to leave. And the sergeant's like, yeah, get out of here. So I left, and then I came back the next week, and it was just plain clothes, no uniform, no nothing. So that was what my last day was like. It was a lot of nothing, and then just followed by just feeling like I just washed away 23 years of stress almost. Not completely, but that last day really got me.
You touched on hypervigilance earlier. How long did it take, or are you still going through getting rid of that while on retirement?
I think like I said, the first couple of weeks, it still felt like, well, I'm going to go back. This is just vacation. That's what it felt like. So there was still that kind of potential stressor of going back to work. After you take a vacation for 2 weeks and you go somewhere fun, you don't want to go back to work, right? No one does. But especially in our job, I think that hypervigilance lasted with me for probably a couple, 2 or 3 weeks. Once I realized I wasn't going back, that kind of stuff just kind of faded away a little. Every now and again, I still feel that way, especially if you hear something about work. Or I was walking down the street, walking my dog one morning, and I live in the county where I patrolled, and 2 guys ran by code 3 as I'm walking. It's pretty early in the morning. I'm like, oh, where are we going? No, it wasn't me. I wasn't going anywhere. So it was just them. And I had to realize, I had to pull myself back. I'm not going there. I'm just walking my dog, man. That's it.
Did you have, I mean, you talked about all the stresses that just kind of poured off of you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's 23 years of accumulated acute traumas and stress. And were there, and I know the answer to this, but for those of you, obviously there's people listening that don't do what we do, right? So I know in your brain, you're going to think, don't ask stupid questions, but like, at what points in your career were you talked about going on vacation, not coming back to work. Did you have points in your career, aside from vacation, where you were just dealing with so much shit from the job, whether it's trauma, whether it's internal, administrative, where you were just like, I don't want to come back here. I don't want to go to work today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's fleeting moments that I felt that, and I had days where you just feel, oh, I don't want to do this again. Because you just had those days where it was seeing dead bodies or dealing with this person, their problem, X, Y, and Z people trying to hurt you or attack you. And that's not a daily occurrence, but it does happen. I mean, I listen to, you think about, working in New York versus Portland versus the agency we worked at,
right?
Portland being a larger city. You go, well, okay, yeah, we do get some crazy stuff here, but it's not as bad. So sometimes that was like, okay, there can be worse. And that was some stuff that I would think about occasionally from time to time. But I think that, dealing with that over that period of time, I think, and then plus immersing myself in work. And we talked about this earlier, because I was an instructor in a lot of different things, and I did a lot of things that caused me to work overtime. I did a lot of things I did on my time, and that took away from me being, sometimes being a husband, sometimes being a father, and sometimes being a friend or a son, or, whatever role that I was playing with whatever person, that would take away. And I know that it did affect other family members, to some degree. And it was something that it takes time and a willingness to kind of realize what it is that you're doing and the mistakes that you're making outside of work, to fix all that. And when I immersed myself in work, being an instructor and doing things, I enjoyed it. I loved teaching, and I loved watching people learn and watching that light bulb kick on when they figured out, oh, this is how I handle X, Y, or Z. Or, this scenario, I won in this scenario, when you give them confrontational simulation type thing. That stuff was very rewarding to me to watch that turn on. But when you work so much and you're constantly there teaching, wearing different uniforms, whether it's an instructor uniform or a patrol uniform or whatever, you're you're immersed into the agency, and you're not giving enough attention, one, to yourself, which you need, and then also you're not giving it to those people around you that support you. And we all make those mistakes to some degree, some more than others, some do good, and that's fine. Everybody's different, but I think that everybody goes through that in this job because it's new and it's fun. I want to be able to teach these people, and you look up to the people that were teaching you when you were new, right? I want to do that. I want to do all of what they're doing. And you can do it, but the problem is you have to figure out that balance. And sometimes it takes a while to get that balance, and I had a turning point in my career where, I got rid of a couple of things, partially because I was forced to, and then, also spend more time with my family or whatever it is I needed to do to keep all those relationships going. I kind of realigned myself to go, okay, work isn't the most important thing. And I think sometimes it takes people longer than others. It took me longer than it probably should have. But I think somewhere in that 10 to 15 year range, and you could look at probably most departments and most people in those departments or agencies, and you'll find that they'll tell you that was where they kind of knew what they were doing. They didn't really have too many questions, and they were an experience that then things just kind of blew up. You've been doing this for so long that you lose track of yourself, and you get sucked into everything, and to figure out that you're getting sucked into that stuff and then taking a step back is sometimes very hard to do because you really want to do this stuff, but you also have to make those, you don't want to sacrifice your family or your well-being for this.
I remember a very specific conversation you and I had during that time frame of your career, when you were letting go of those collateral duties, and it was a rough time.
Yeah.
But I specifically remember you saying it was the best thing that ever happened for you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
as far as and when I say the best thing that happened for you, as far as letting go of all the collateral duties and passing that torch so that you could focus on your wife, your kid, you know what I mean?
Right.
And just being home, home, right? Having more of a normalcy. I'll never forget that conversation, Scott, because my I don't know if you realize, but in the beginning of my career, I modeled my career after you in the sense that the time frames, because I remember you telling me, like, after you helped me get hired, like, I mean, you went to people on my behalf, like, no, we need to hire this guy. But I remember you telling me, like, I want to be an FTO and I want to be a DT instructor. And I remember you specifically telling me, look, I know you're skilled and I know you can teach. Give it 5 years. Give it 5 years. And I did. And I waited to that 5-year mark before I did anything.
Yeah.
And I like, kudos to you, man. Like, and I know you said you kind of said that, some of it was forced on you. Cool. I like to think of that as God ordained. However it happened,
True.
like there was a reason, right? And kudos to you for recognizing that in your maturity in the career, and because let's face it, you're not a typical cop statistics when it comes to marriages and families, and nor am I. I refuse to be.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and it's hard because so much of that happens in our career where people lose their spouses, or they do things they normally wouldn't do. Because we're out there doing the Lord's work, as they say, and I truly believe that we are. It's
Amen.
just that there's just so much of it. It's just the cops sometimes get caught up in the moment of things, because there's so much adrenaline, there's so much this all the time, and it's easy to get sidetracked in what you should really be doing. And
high risk lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah. Whether it's the drinking, I've heard other people that they talk about this, and of course, I've had drinks in my life, and I've had those moments, but to me, I've just been lucky where it's never been something I'd use to cope.
Right.
Just luck of the draw, I suppose, to some degree. Sure, there's been bad nights where, you do that and you try one on and you shouldn't. But at the same time, I was just very lucky that never became an issue for me. And I'm glad it wasn't. I found other ways to cope with things. I think that kind of that awakening I had at about 15, 16 years on, so to speak, it made me realize that there's more important things than doing this job. And don't get me wrong, it is an important job, and you have to have really good people doing it. And I think everybody I've worked with, to include you guys, are really good people. And and I've never, of course, you're going to have some of those ones we talked about earlier, but it's inevitable. You're going to have bad teachers, you're going to have bad bankers, you're going to have bad presidents, whatever, right? But you're going to have bad cops. But you have to figure out a way to deal with that stuff. And I think the trending is helping people do it. We joke about a meditation room, like I said earlier. Well, the meditation room is great because it really didn't wash away 23 years. No, not really. But it really, that day I let go of it because I knew that it was over. And like I said, it's like, I finally stopped looking as I'm driving around at people's license plate tags to make sure they're, not expired. That was something you do on day shift because there's nothing else to do, and I jest. I mean, there is other things to do. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, you do something for so long and you're constantly watching people all the time, to feel like that let go because you don't really have to do it anymore. It's an amazing feeling because now I don't have to worry. I'm going to be vigilant. I'm going to pay attention to my surroundings and do these things like most of us should, right? But it's not the same. It's not the same as when you're in a car in a uniform all the time, 40, 50 hours a week, I think.
Sure, 23 years is a long career. It's a distinguishable career. And after going into retirement, do you find it challenging trying to redefine your purpose outside of law enforcement?
Yeah. Because one of the things that we do is what our job is, it kind of identifies us. I think you guys have alluded to that before, and it's absolutely true. We identify as a police officer. I was talking to a relative the other day that was over here during the holidays, and younger relative of mine, and we were having a chat, and they were asking me some similar questions, which was interesting. And I said, well, you go to a thing and I'm there with you. You're going to introduce me as Scott the cop, right? And I think you guys have talked to me before, and it's very true. You're not going to introduce, I said, your mom is a physical therapist and she has a good job. It's a noble job. She's getting people healthy again, right? But you're not going to introduce your mom as the physical therapist. This is just my mom, right? This is my uncle who's a cop. Right. We always get identified as our job and that's good and bad. I think, because it is a noble profession. We are doing a lot of good things, but there's also a stigma too. Because like in some circles, you're like, oh, I wish they hadn't said that, because you're like, how are people going to feel? How are people going to, and that I did that throughout my career. This is my police. I'm like, okay, well, I'm more than just that, I like long walks on the beach, what have you, just like anybody else. But, it's funny because it's just such an identity for us. And I think that going into retirement, I think it's good to realize that, I don't have to worry about that. And it's nice because, I did that at one time. And even though it's only been a couple of months, it almost feels like it's another lifetime ago almost at this point. Not that I'm so divorced from it, but since I'm not going there every day, I'm doing what I want to do every day, as opposed to I have to go here and work for whoever. Which is
really nice. Kind of nice because I've talked to another friend of ours who retired shortly before you, who spends most of his time in Central Oregon and now has a full beard. It's amazing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, but I've had conversations with him in the past. One particular day when I won't even get into the story, but I tried to drown him on the Clackamas River because I know he listens and he'll laugh. But what was interesting in talking to him was in retirement, the mental health aspect of it. It's like, yeah, I have dreams now that I like, not good dreams. Like waking up however many times a night now that I never had in my career. And as I talk about it with other people that are retired as well, and I guess I would pose that question to you, is my only, and I'm not a pro, I'm not a doctor, but it seems to me like if we're in the career for years and day after day after day, our mind never has that opportunity to mind dump. Mm-hmm. And the way he was explaining it was like, now that he's retired and a certain amount of months have gone by, the brain is finally starting to dump, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's going to have to go through a purge because of all the shit that you've seen for years and years and years. Have you experienced anything like that yet? Or hopefully you never do. And if you have, like, after 20 some years, are you, I never had cop dreams, ever. Never.
Oh, I had them all the time.
Yeah, I never did until probably 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Now it's every night.
Yes. Yeah. I had them periodically through my career. As far as afterwards, it's weird. I'll have dreams about being at the office.
Yeah.
But that's, and being around people. I don't know if that's just part of me missing that. I think I do miss some of that, obviously. The camaraderie with people in the briefing room, like, that's just not something you ever get anywhere else.
Ever. Yeah.
I mean, I know military people can say that. I know even the firefighters, they can say that too.
Second responders.
Yeah, I know. I love them. They're great.
Yeah.
They do chest compressions. So, but
after we've been for 20 minutes doing chest compressions to make sure the scene is safe. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So
sorry, Mitch's dad.
But yeah, I think more of it is just the, you remember, I have dreams about being at the office or just driving around. It's not so much a specific incident or anything like that. Sure, I'd had those dreams as well, but more so during my career, it seems like, especially when they were fresh with whatever incident it was, I would think about it and the dreams would come after that. Whether it's somebody that had harmed themselves or, this individual doing X, Y, and Z, it just, some of that stuck with you. And I still kind of think about some of those because some of them were just so out there that you're just like, you just can't believe someone would do what they did. And you try to wrestle with that. And I think that's where my dreams came in, trying to wrestle or trying to understand when you just never will.
Yeah.
Because you're not that person. And I know that you'll never understand it, but you try hard to do that. And I've talked to professionals, that I've gone and seen people and I don't understand this. And they help me to realize that I don't have to understand it. I just have to understand that person was either having a bad day or what. And they took whatever action they took, and whether it's harm themselves or whatever. And that really helped me a lot. And I think maybe that's why I don't have the dreams. It's just maybe I've gotten that off my chest enough.
Good.
That
through, like you said, though, through therapy over the years, like you were cognizant enough to recognize it earlier on. I wouldn't say early in your career, but earlier on, while
early
still
enough that that, because like I said, that 15-year mark was that point for me. And once I got past that, I mean, that's when I started talking to somebody that was professional, because I just knew. And then and another thing that hit me too while I was during my career is my father passed away a couple of years ago, and that with all that stuff and then a couple other relatives died after I went back and worked through all that, because that was frustrating, obviously, and very sad, and it really, really tore me up for a while. And it's you look at these things, you look at all the things that were in place when you started this job, And then you go all the way through it. What's different? A lot's different. Certain people aren't around anymore.
Right.
Those types of things. And that's the things that I think more bothered me. Not that other things didn't, but it seems like that's what caused me my stress more so than, the job obviously did, but just looking back on it, you go, what's happened? What's different?
Right. Was there can you think of, and if you're willing to talk about it, if you're not, say no, but can you think of of like we always talk about a call, like, and there's obviously over 23 years, there's dozens, right? And there's, Mitch and I have talked about the few that stick out for us. And if you're willing to kind of go into some detail about what that call or calls were for you, like, is there one that still just kind of, and I don't want to tear off scabs if it's going to do that, by all means.
No,
but I know you've been seeing therapists and stuff, so if you're willing to.
Yeah. So there's one. There's a couple that'll always kind of stick with me, and they were people that were trying to harm themselves. One succeeded and one didn't. I don't know what happened to the one that didn't. At least he didn't succeed while I was working, that I know of. The one that really got me, that I had a recruit who ended up leaving the department under different circumstances later down the road, but a very good recruit at the time. He and I responded to an assault with a weapon occurring now. And what we found out later was that this young female, she was, from my best recollection, she was probably in her early 20s at the time, 25, 24. And what we figured out is she called in her own suicide attempt. But we didn't know that initially because, as we all know, in cop work, you get, someone calls in, they tell a dispatcher something, the call taker, the call taker tells the dispatcher tells you what's going on. So some stuff gets lost in translation, obviously. But what ended up happening is we ended up going, and like I said earlier, we have all these toys and tools available. We got the shield, we got the 40 millimeter, and we got the rifles and the guns because we thought somebody was getting assaulted with a weapon of some sort. And we go there, and it ends up, it was this young gal, and she had shot and killed herself. And when we got there, she was still hanging on. And we tried, but it was to no avail. We couldn't save her because she was still there. And I would imagine I think about this to this day. Did she hear us coming in? Did she hear us talking? I don't know why I focused on that. I just did. But it was the one suicide I just never understood. And I'm not meant necessarily to understand them all, because obviously somebody was in pain and somebody was hurting, and that their pain and their suffering was real to them. And, it should be to us because they're having this problem. But I just, I was maybe 6 or 7 days before you got there, either one of you. And I couldn't understand why she shot herself, because you look around and you see these pictures of her. She's lying on the bed, the gun's next to her, and she shot herself in the heart, which is very common for females, because females don't like they don't want to have, guys will just shoot themselves in the head, they choose to do that. That's just normal. And well, it's not normal, but it's how
normal
men
for
do
guys
it.
that are going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
They want to get it done. And the girls don't want to screw up their face. And I know that sounds callous and stuff, but that's true.
That's
they
the truth.
Don't typically want to make themselves look bad later for those that come.
Or they'll do pills. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of thing. So she ended up shooting herself in the heart, took herself out, but it never resonated. My recruit and I had these long conversations. I think that was a really good way for both of us to heal, even though we didn't at the time probably know that we were having trauma from that. You look at her and she these pictures where she's just got this amazing smile. She's with some friends or with a relative or whatever. And I'm like, how does that get to here? Right. And then we found a note, and then it dawned on me how people get to that point. And her note was very specific about why she's having all these troubles. And she said that she had such horrible depression that she couldn't even get out of bed in the morning because it physically hurt her to get out of bed. And I never forgot that. Reading that note, I could still see it in my mind's eye. I can still see that note, and I can still see her laying on the bed. Her face was intact. She didn't look upset. It was just one of those moments that just blew me away. And it was one that stuck with me for a while. It was one I had to talk about when I saw some people, some therapists for, because it was the one that affected me the most. I mean, I know there's times when young children are harmed, and those are very traumatic. Yeah. And I had that as well, and that's not fun. But this particular one always seemed to stick with me.
It's weird what happens in our brains, and maybe at some point we can have a professional on here to explain it. But how some calls, I've heard some people talk about calls that I'm like, really, really that affects, but it's just horrifying for them, and it's because of the difference in, I don't know, like the way our brains are made up. I don't know
how our brains perceive trauma.
Yeah.
Right. Weird. It's wow. Did you said right about that 15-year mark is when you really kind of started down the therapy road. Did that have a drastic change in you as Scott once you started coming through that?
Yes, because as we all know, I mean, I enjoyed having a lot of good friends that came out of this career that I still obviously stay in touch with, such as you guys, other people I go to coffee with not every day, but once a week, probably. Yeah. The therapy it's good to talk to people. Like, I can sit down and bullshit with you guys and now help, but you're not impartial. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's you're not impartial, that you do this job, and so you just automatically understand just generally what I'm going through. It was really good for me, and it's the same as like you talking to your guys' wives, or and my wife or somebody else, or a friend outside of work. That I have a couple of friends outside of work that, my favorite saying ever is, for those that understand, no explanation is necessary. For those who don't understand, no explanation can suffice. Because if you think about it, you talk to your non-cop friends. I know you have one that's been around for a long time, that you've mentioned, and I've met that guy, and and maybe he does to some degree, but it's not the same thing, right? He doesn't have that experience, and it's not any knock against him. He just hasn't done it. So me having a person that's not only trained in dealing with that kind of stuff, but just someone I just don't know. It's almost like that stranger on a train or plane phenomenon where I can go, okay, I can say and vomit all this stuff to this person.
Right.
And they can pull things out of you that you didn't even realize that you're
which is scary. So, it's scary sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, oh, well, I didn't even realize I was doing that or thinking that or what have you, and that was super helpful, because that was a point in my career where I was having some stressors and realizing that I had gotten, what's the word? Too deep and
too invested.
Correct. And I mean, I think you have to be invested to do it. But when you get so into it that you put everything else on hold, that's where you go, you gotta come out of that or snap yourself out of it. So I think that's what really helped me at that point in my career, is to realize that, getting that out with somebody different or somebody else is what's going to benefit you the most.
Yeah, that's, and God bless your wife. God bless our wives, period.
I know, right?
Right? I mean, holy crap. The spouses. I mean, this, like, Mitch and I have said it before. And I'll even say Mitch is the double whammy, because Mitch's wife's a dispatcher, for shit's sake.
It's positives and negatives. Yeah. I mean, she understands some of the trauma that we go through, right?
Yeah, that's helpful. But to me, it would be, and I don't know. And I mean, obviously it's, see, here's the stress, right? As opposed to going out and observing it like we do. And I am glad to some degree. I certainly don't want people to think that this can't work out, but I don't think I could have ever been married to another police officer.
Correct.
That wouldn't have worked for me, because to me, it's you're dealing with the same thing and neither one of you, it's the same thing, and you're just all intertwined now.
Yeah, there's no separation from it. Yeah.
No, and I'm not saying that people can't make it work, because people do, and
Oh, yeah.
they have. I've
Sure.
seen plenty of great relationships that have,
Yeah.
that have that to it. But
Yeah.
I just know I could never have done that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. And I've said it before. I mean, God bless my wife. She's always been my rock. And unfortunately, when I say she's been my rock, and I can say this standing before God, she's also one that I've shit on the most. It's just it's because of my own issues. And I mean, there's regret, there's guilt, but it makes us stronger people coming through it. I mean, I've been with my wife 31 years.
A long time.
It's a long time, and hopefully it'll be another 31 years. It'll be like 250 when it happens, but
Oh my God.
but you know what I mean? Like,
it'll feel like 50.
right? Yeah. But I mean, the people we shit on the most are the ones that we love. It's the truth.
Yeah,
And
it's the truth.
in this career, it's man, it's just tenfold. I think, not for everybody. Not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's you come to realize. I know for me, as you guys know, I've gone through my own shit in the last year, and it's been God. It's been a godsend for me, because it made me realize, man, you're just an angry dude, Brian. You are really, really angry, and I honestly never really realized, for me, how angry I was at the core. I was just an angry dude, and it's I'm not gonna say it's the job, but the job didn't help it any for me.
No, and I don't think you're wrong in saying it's a job. Not specifically. It's everything that happens at the job that weighs on you, and you don't have, or you don't initially find a way to deal with that.
Right.
And then you either take it out on others or don't do anything. Because I've been in this boat where I just go home and I just stare at the wall.
Yeah.
And those are times when someone else, your loved one, is trying to talk to you, your wife or whatever, your spouse, and they're trying to ask you questions, and you just tune them out. And I've done that. And it's like you said, you don't realize you're doing it until, right. And like you said, my wife, I'm very lucky. She's put up with a lot. And then that's just the job. I think that the spouses of police officers and other first responders and military people are very special people.
Very special.
And I could name hundreds of examples of people I know that are dear friends. And, I've been very lucky in the circle of people that I know. There's not a lot of divorces. Yeah, they've had some shit times. I agree. A lot of shit times, but they've come through it somehow. And it's because they're willing to change. And that's a big part of it. Because I know a lot of people in my career that I could tell you in 23 years how many different people have come and gone that you wouldn't have ever guessed. It's like, oh, I can't believe that guy would do X, Y, and Z. And it's not because they're bad people. It just got caught in a bad situation. And unfortunately, some of them lied about it, which, as we know, doesn't help. And they just have made these bad choices and then exacerbated it by trying to cover it up or lying about it. If you just said what you'd done, maybe you'll lose a job. Maybe because maybe it's not something you can keep a job for, a police job for. But at the same time, and I look at these people and I go, "You're a great person." I had a coach that was fantastic, and they had an issue with a particular type of thing, and just couldn't stop that issue, and that's something. And they were given a couple chances, and it's just like, it's still a great person. I'm sure I haven't talked to them in a while, but sure, still a great person. And one of my favorite coaches. Just love that person to death. Got along really well, learned a lot, so it's not, not everybody can get through it. And it's frustrating to me to see that, because I've seen so many people over years that have just lost their way and they can't get back on it.
Yeah.
And
that's just in life, right? Even if it's the job, like job's a job, whatever.
Yeah.
It's the job. But hopefully, I mean, if they lose their way, it's not just about not being a cop anymore, but maybe hopefully for me, that would be, if I were to talk to somebody like that, like, cool, you lost your career over this, but hopefully now you're set on this different path, because your job is your job. You can find work anywhere. You can do anything.
Yeah.
Just because you lost, you're not a cop anymore. Big fucking deal.
Right.
Big fucking deal.
Yeah.
Like, just don't lose your way with your character, your integrity, your morals, and your faith if you have it. Right. I mean,
absolutely.
Like my tagline on our podcast under my description is a verse from James: "Without trials, we have no perseverance." I say it all the time because it's so true. We have to go through trials, but we have to persevere. We have to persevere and come out of those trials, learning from it and building character from those trials.
Absolutely. I will disagree with you, but I will say that I think it is, because it defines people so much. It is a big deal if they lose this job, because it was their identity, especially if it's a newer person. Because I've had recruits that have gotten involved in things and you think, oh, these guys going to be a good, and then next thing you know, there's like two of them in a row. And I'm like, how in the hell, and I'm like, and you guys know them. I'm not going to obviously mention their names, but they weren't truthful. And it's like, that was one of the first things I told them. I didn't give them the example. I said, listen, I asked them, what is your most important weapon? And most of them would look at me. Brian knows the answer to this.
Yep.
Mitch knows the answer to this too, but it's, what are most people going to say? Well, my pepper spray, my baton, my gun.
Right.
No, man, it's your brain and your mouth. As a combination, right? Use your head and talk to people respectfully, and talk to people in a way and you'll be fine. And be truthful, people. Don't tell people you're going to do something if you can't do it.
Yep.
I mean, you can lie to criminals to see if they'll confess. I have no problem with that. But at the same time, and there's ways to do that, but at the same time, don't lie to anybody else.
Yep.
All right. Especially your spouse. Don't do any of that stuff. And then, and don't lie to your bosses. Don't lie to your coworkers. And people did that. And it's just like, man, anything. You did not use your head on.
Right.
And I think they were so worried of getting caught. One of them made it even worse by trying to fix the problem that had been created, when if they had just said, no, I don't know what happened to that thing. Because someone had lost something and it was a piece of property. Okay. I'll just make it generic that way, but they lost a piece of property. And then they tried to exacerbate it by trying to get a new piece of that property and put it there. Oh, I found it. Well, no, dude, you didn't. Yeah, try to cover up the loss of this property.
As opposed to saying, and it's not a big, even if that property flies off the top of a car and they were freaking out, it's like, yep, that shit happens. I forgot to put it in the trunk when I drove away. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
no harm, no foul. Done.
Could you get written up? Sure.
But maybe. Yeah.
But I'll just say, right? Because let's say you just do. Yeah. What's the harm in that? Yeah, that happens to everybody. Everybody gets written up for something.
Yeah, you ain't doing your job. You don't get written up.
We have 8,000 policies that are just guidelines.
Yes.
But if you do something wrong, they're going to use every single policy against you, because that's the way it works.
Yes, it is.
I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah, anyway. Weird.
But, oh man.
A couple of questions, like,
sure.
And this is very, like, if for me, my legacy in my life is not the job that I do, right? It's and I've said it before, I don't want my kids and my family at my memorial service or whatever saying, oh, my dad was such a great cop. No. However, we all have legacies, and you have a massive legacy, whether you realize it or not, at the agency we work for. Yeah, it is. So let me ask you this, now that you're retired, what's the legacy that you hope you left behind?
Have fun. Realize that there's so much stress in this job that I used to do. It's weird to say that.
Yeah.
That, have fun. People get real serious about a lot of things, and there's a time to be serious and a time to do what you're supposed to do and take care of it. But you can't not enjoy yourself when you're doing it, whatever job you're doing, but especially this being a cop. It's you've got to have fun, whether it's making fun of this or joking about that or just, just sitting there and breathing and making fun of everything, and I know sometimes that becomes an issue as we know with certain things, but I think as long as you're being, yeah.
Sorry. No pun intended.
Yeah.
I'll say it now.
Dick. So, that aside, I mean, as long as you're respectful and thinking of everybody's rights and feelings, I guess, to some degree, you should still be able to, in this culture, joke about anything, because you see a lot of crappy things and you have to deal with a lot of crappy things and a lot of good things. It wasn't all crappy. There were a lot of good things. I know I helped some people along the way, maybe hopefully change people's lives. I don't know. I think that, you can talk to people till you're blue in the face about, why do you do this? Why did you steal that? Why do you take this drug? But it all comes from within, and that the bad guys and us and everybody, if you can get through that job with a little bit of humor and a little bit of grace and realize that, you're doing community service. I mean, really, we got hired to do community service. And so someone thought a lot of us at some point and realized that we were good enough people to do the job that needed to be done. And at the end of the day, you can take that with you and go, you know what? I did everything the best I could. I tried to help people. I tried to investigate everything I could investigate. But at the end of the day, did I have fun? Yeah, I had a good time there. And that far, to me, outweighed all the bad times. And there were some. But once you get through and realize that if you can get through that job and have fun at it, because it can be a fun job. Running lights, code 3, like you said, it's one of those adrenaline rushes you'll never forget. Right?
Yeah.
And I will tell you on certain occasions, EVOC instructor, that I had an angel looking out for me on Highway 217 a couple times. So I will tell you that, and I'm very lucky that I didn't get any crashes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just go, oh my God, how did I not crash into the second median?
Mitch is over there cringing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like, just the thought of riding with you.
Shuffle 10 and 2. You can do it.
Right. Eyes up, damn it. Eyes up. Yeah.
Look where you want to go. Look in the future. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Like, only imagine being a coach with a recruit driving code for the first time. How stressful.
Oh, God. That's extremely stressful. That's the worst.
Especially as a, because I'm an EVOC instructor. So as a DT instructor, an EVOC instructor, and you have a recruit and they're driving, you're like, oh God, you're over there tapping your brake foot like on the floorboard, but you just got to let them. Yeah. Just, and why in the fuck do recruits love the brake so much? I don't like, I remember Scott telling me this as a reserve, because I didn't know I was a civilian driver.
Yeah.
Like, what's the one thing, and on the Crown, I remember the Crown Vics, we rolled up to that call we were talking about earlier with the guys, at this apartment fight or whatever. And man, the brakes are glowing red. I mean, glowing red.
I had flames shooting off them. I had flames shooting off them one time.
Oh, I remember you saying, what's the one thing on this car that we need to make sure that we go home alive? And I'm like, we don't have roll. You're like, the brakes, you moron. We're going to need those. Oh, yeah.
Don't use them all right now.
Right. Yeah. You use them up in the first 5 stoplights.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my God.
I can honestly say, you're talking about the good times and the bad times of this career. And this is the God's honest truth. And people look at me quizzically when I say this, but I have never, not once, had a day that I went to work that I didn't want to be there. And that's the truth. Now, would I have rather have been someplace else, like hunting or on the lake? Sure. But I didn't detest. I didn't detest. I was like, no, I enjoyed every day. every day doing that job. Love it. Absolutely love it. It's
agreed.
You know, it's I say it all the time. It's the best, worst career in the world.
Oh my gosh. It is the best, worst career.
It is, right?
Oh
I mean,
my gosh,
because we do identify it. We are so fucked up from this career. But a lot of good things have come out of this for me personally. And Mitch, you can expand on it for you, like, what the career's done for you. For me, interestingly enough, as odd as it sounds, it actually tamed me down. As weird as that sounds, not that I was out running wild and shit before,
right?
But there's such a sense, like you said, that higher standard.
Yeah.
No different.
You have to
took
grow
an
up.
oath for the yeah. You took an oath.
Everybody starts at a different age. I mean, Mitch started very young. You and I were just a little bit older. I couldn't have done it at 21. I know that for a fact.
No way.
No, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But
nope.
I
could have done it. I would have been in jail. I would have been thrown in jail in the first 2 or 3 weeks. The first time somebody, at 21 years old in the military, the first time somebody spit on me, I'd have tore their face off at 21.
Right?
Well, yeah,
because you're not thinking straight.
Correct.
You want to defend yourself,
Yeah.
But,
yep.
Yeah.
The only downside of starting as 21 or 21, 22 is you lose a lot of your youth. I grew up real fast, and it's unfortunate, but I also matured real fast.
Yeah.
And I did a lot during the first 5 years of my career where now I don't want to use the word burned out, but it's getting to that point. So now I have to find a new passion. I've always challenged myself by doing harder things in this career. And when I challenge myself and I accomplish it, I get bored. Then I got to find something different. And I still have.
You chose the hardest school this career has to offer, dude.
Yeah, right out of the gate.
That's a tough school, bro. Like that.
Yeah. And now it's time to move on and challenge myself again. Can't just sit around. You got to challenge yourself.
And it's interesting because I was just reading my son actually pointed this out to me like last week, and then I started reading some literature, and it's like the human brain isn't even fully developed till 25 to 29 years old. And we're thrusting 21-year-olds into this profession. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's no easy thing. And I see it. We can all think of folks that we work with that have been doing this job a long time, and you can see that. You can see it in their eyes. Like it's that combat stare, that 1,000-yard stare, because they're just they only want to work graveyard because that's where all the fun shit. It's like, okay, but you've been doing that for 15 years. It's time to get your circadian rhythm normal again and change up that hypervigilance cycle. But yeah, we've all seen it, and they push through. Nobody. I was actually that. Mitch and I were talking, but he was telling me about this book that I'm going to order. You got sitting there on your desk. Yeah, it's called Fit for Off Duty, and it's like a 70-page book. And I've been sitting here, and one of the things it says in the book overview, every law enforcement officer is a trauma survivor. Even veteran officers may not realize this, but constant exposure to traumatic events takes a serious toll. The body is affected, so is the nervous system, and so are the officer's personal relationships. Off-duty days can become something to dread rather than look forward to. It doesn't need to be this way. And it's I can't wait to read this book. I actually ordered it because a lot of the times we find our healing in going back to the place that caused the trauma. Because that's where we're comfortable.
Mm-hmm. I agree, because that last few years it was more of, okay, I'm not training anybody. All I'm doing is I'm coming in, doing that job, and going home at the end of the night.
Yep.
And then at that point, I'm done. And it took a while to get there, right? Like that book is a great point. It took 15, 16, 17 years to get there. But you go home, I'm done. I'm not in a necessarily, take home cars. No, I don't want to take home. And that's my own
with that shit.
Yep. And if you want one, that's great. I don't really care. But for me, it's like, I want to leave it at the office. If you want to sign it to me, that's great. but it's mine, but I'm leaving it there. I'm going to drive my own car home in my own clothes. And I'm going to go on my drive home was 15, 20 minutes. I mean, yours is like 8 hours. I know, but I
only
swear to
because of
God,
traffic.
I'll tell you what, we drove from where we live, and I live a lot closer to the office than you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it takes 10 minutes for me on a day without traffic.
Right.
We drove out your way to go to a spot, around the Thanksgiving holiday, and, had to go down the
main
Interstate
freeway
84.
there. Yeah, you can say it. 84.
Yeah, I went that way, and I went that way, and I'm like, I drove like, oh my God, we're just now getting close to where he lives. It's been a fucking hour. I'm like, how do you do this every day?
Yeah, but it was off hours, right? It was off.
Sure.
I mean, because of the shift work,
but still,
it was off hours.
And see, I'm thinking to myself, well, then there's people that we know that, like the one you mentioned earlier. I mean, that particular drive had to be amazing as well.
God.
I mean, I went out to that individual's house at one time, and I'm like, oh my God, it took an hour plus to get. And then there are people that live in like 4 counties down.
Yes.
I mean, they're smaller counties, well, 2.5, right? So
but it's a 2-hour drive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost 2 hours, because I go that route to go to another relative's house.
Yeah.
I'm talking about those people that live off of Highway 47. They go down that way, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, how the hell do you live out here? That's great that you're far away, but to get in and the court.
Yep. Mitch's house is the precinct that you and I worked out of. Mitch's house is further away from that precinct than my house, believe it or not. And he's in the county.
That blows my mind. That blows my absolute mind. I don't believe it.
Yep.
Prove it.
I'm telling you, it is. It's crazy to think. When you think about, the people that live out in the area where I did my first code run with you, where the naked chick was in the truck.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's way further away. Further away.
I guess it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will goes to show you, if you don't work out in a place that much and you work on one side of the county, it's like, I have no idea where this person is. Yeah, that was a really funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was my very first night, Mitch. I had graduated Reserve Academy on a Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm.
The following Friday, I'm doing my first as a reserve, right? And I'm riding with Scott. Well, Scott's riding with me, if we're being honest. I'm driving, because even my first time ever, he's like, nope, you're my bitch all night. You're driving me anywhere I want to go.
Well, in the first place we went to was coffee, of course.
Of course, second briefing. Yeah. And this is this is back in the 5P to 3A days.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to the what we call the Tanis Bucks over one, in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting there, and this call comes out. It was a DUI crash, I think is what it came out as, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And it's in the west, on the west end, past the tunnel.
Oh yeah,
like
it was out
right
there.
in the town that starts with a T. Mitch is like, oh, those are my people.
Yeah, town. Anyway,
For those of you that don't know, Scott, for his entire 23 years working for that agency, refused to go west of a certain road. We are not going. This is the cutoff. We don't go west. Well, guess what? At the time, Scott's it. I'm riding with him. He's like,
we had to go.
We had to go.
Yeah.
So I did my very first code run, get onto the highway, and I run code all the way out there. Neither one of us have a fucking clue where we're going, because I'm brand new. He doesn't work out there. And we get...
Well, I knew you had to go west.
What?
So exactly. I knew that was the thing. So I knew you had to go towards the coast.
Right. And I think there's a tunnel somewhere in there. I can't remember.
And the funny thing is, I knew it was out there, but I thought it was way past where it was. And when we go through the tunnel, I'm like, oh, we've either gotten too far or not far enough. I didn't know. Right. And I'm looking at the map book. I go, I can't find anything
map
in
book.
here.
Yeah, we didn't have map on our computers in those days.
No.
We pulled out a fucking Thomas guide.
And I can't get through
10 o'clock at night or whatever.
That would be rough.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
It's not a fun thing.
And I'm like, I don't know. And he doesn't expect me to know. Like, that's my first night. And he's coming through the Thomas guy, and I'm trying, I'm holding the light, and we're trying to find it. And
because we ended up pulling over to the side of the road because I'm like, listen, stop. I gotta look this up. And I'm putting the red light on so we're not, lighting ourselves up. And I'm trying to look through this and adjust my eyes. And then all of a sudden, this ambulance goes flying by running code 3. I'm like, you know what? It was a hunt. I said, follow that ambulance, Brian. And sure as shit, the ambulance. A lot of times we go to these types of calls. It wasn't so much a police call. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. It was more of a medical call. It ended up being a police call because she ended up getting arrested. But that was a pain. But anyway, so they dispatched medical because there might have been a medic issue with this particular individual, which I believe there was. And anyway, they happened to be going to the same spot, and just luck of the draw. And I got him to follow in behind code 3, and it took us right to where we needed to go.
Right to where we needed to go.
Luck.
And we're in the middle of the woods. Like I remember when we turned off the highway. Remember all the fucking deer across it. And I'm like, and it's that windy.
And you're trying to dodge them as we drive through.
Yeah, like what the hell is going on? And I remember we get there, and I'm just kind of hanging back to my first night, and Scott, and there's this truck kind of down this little, I would say an embankment. It's like this weird drive, right? It's all like people live up there, but they look like cabins. Mm-hmm. And this truck is all cattywampus over the edge of this little.
Was a train track?
Was it train tracks?
It was on the train track there. Yeah.
Oh, it was on the train track. Yeah. So Scott goes up there, and he's got his flashlight, and all of a sudden he drops his flashlight, and he's like, "You're going to want to come check this out." I'm like, what? Like, what is happening? It's like, and I don't see anybody in this truck. I don't see anybody. I'm like, what is happening? Truck's running. I don't see anybody. I don't know what to think. And I walk up there, and there's a female in this truck. If I remember right, like her shoulders and head, like were down on the floorboard, but opposite, right? Not just laying down all cozy, but like her head and her shoulders are down on the floorboard. Her feet are up on the opposite side, and she is butt naked. Not a stitch of clothing, and not an attractive butt naked, mind you.
No.
But the thing of it is, there's no clothes anywhere. There's no clothes in the truck. Like, where did this person come from? I have no idea. So now, and of course, the doors are locked. We're beating on the door, like trying to get her to. Oh, that was my very first call ever.
The truck was still running too, wasn't it?
Yeah, hanging over the. Yes,
we were afraid she was going to go and hurt herself intentionally, but she was going to get hurt because the car was going to. The truck was going to fly over the thing or whatever, and the railroad track. I'm saying, oh, good God. And we're able to get her to unlock the door at some point. I don't remember what finally got her to do that. And then, someone hammered. Some neighbor brought a couple blankets or something, I believe, or some sort of clothing. And well, anyway, we had to end up taking her in for a Dewey, and that made me even more happy.
Yes, because now I had my first call, and we're walking into the Sally Port of a jail with a female wrapped in a blanket in handcuffs. Like, what else do you do?
Right. Welcome to law enforcement, Brian.
Yeah.
What's that?
So welcome to law enforcement.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was literally my very first call ever. So I came
never forget it.
Never forget it. I worked. Now keep in mind, right, as a reserve, I worked a full-time job.
Yeah.
So I worked that Friday. I got off work early at 4:00 so that I could meet Scott for shift at 5. Worked till 3 a.m. Slept Saturday. Went right back. Rode with him again. Saturday.
Yeah, he rode me 2 nights in a row.
2 nights in a row.
It was a little busy, but I don't think it was like that.
Right? No, not that following. That first night it was crazy, and then my friend, and I've talked about it before. It's like in the beginning of all that, it was. I remember, man, I'd been a reserve for maybe 2 months, and I came home from some other because I would work. I'm not joking, Mitch. I worked over 600 hours in 1 year as a reserve.
Yeah, I worked up there
every Friday, Saturday, and I remember my wife saying, "I think you're going to do this full time. Like I know you're going to," and of course I did, right?
Yeah.
Which then led into the welcome to the law enforcement call that we talked about in another podcast with the baby, right? And it's like, well, why the fuck did you keep doing it after that? But here we are.
Yeah.
So to anybody that's listening, the guy that's on here, Scott, his fault that I'm a 16-year deputy.
Well, there you go.
Right.
You're welcome.
So yeah. Well, cool, man. This was awesome. First of all, it was good. I mean, it was awesome to catch up. I know we text and stuff every now and then, but
that was great.
Yeah, this is good. I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Mitch, I would love it if you would at least, like, the importance of all this, folks, is there's some funny shit that happens, right? But anybody that's listening, we really just pray to God that this, something that Scott maybe talked about that maybe touches you or you can assimilate with, that makes you feel that, like, hey, I'm not alone in this. Man, there are so many resources out there. Adam Myers got a website, Stop the Threat, Stop the Stigma. There's crisis lines. Safe Call. Was it Safe Call Now? Like, if you feel like you need to talk to anybody, please, I pray to God that you talk to somebody. I am a testament to therapy. Scott said the same thing. Like, man, go talk to somebody. Get your head straight. I'm not saying get out of the career, but get your head straight and be there for your family. And Mitch, you can even talk more about that as well. Like you're dealing with your own issues.
Yeah, well, first off, we hope the stories and conversations we shared inspired you guys, encourage you guys, and remind you, like what Brian says, you're not alone. One number that I really encourage you to call if you are going through a crisis, PTSD episode, or just you feel like you're alone, is Safe Call Now, is 206-459-3020. I've experienced my own traumas. I've gone through certain experiences that had led me to the path that I'm on now, and being on leave for PTSD, all my diagnosis. This podcast is a therapy for me. I can speak for Brian too. It also is therapy for him. We love talking on here. We love hearing other stories. And that's the helpful part, is knowing that we're not alone when we share these stories with each other. So Scott, I want to thank you for coming on, spending your day with us. Your stories are impactful. There's a mental health challenge that we need to overcome, and we need to break the stigma. So with that, thank you.
Yep. Thank you guys. I appreciate being on.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Scott. And folks, hit the like, subscribe, follow. It's not for monetary purposes. It just helps us so that we don't have to send text messages out to everybody. You'll get the alerts. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, iHeart, and YouTube. So thank you. I hope everybody had an awesome holiday. And Scott, we will catch up.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.